Welcome to an all new episode of the Lisa Ann Experience. I am your host, Lisa Ann, and I am so thankful that you are here with me. I thank you for choosing my podcast. If you're a new listener, welcome to the show. Go back and listen to the episodes that you missed, subscribe, rate, and review. And for my return friends and fans, repeat offenders, as I like to say, thank you for joining me. This is going to be a special sports edition. So, this is a conversation you're going to get to hear that I recorded back in May and wanted to really hold on till right before we get to this wild time in the NFL season. We are at training camp right now. We are already experiencing season ending injuries for players. The news is starting to really flow. And for those of you who play fantasy football, draft season is here. I am recording right now about 5 draft orders a day. So I choose leagues draft orders on Cameo. It's a ton of fun for me because I'm so into it. So I know what a big deal it is. So I make a big deal of it. So I've been doing those. I've got tons of drafts lined up in the future, but I thought, for those of you who know me, you know kind of the background of how I got into sports and how I do sports radio and fantasy football. But for those of you who don't, I will explain to you the love and the interest as well as what sports have done for my life. So, as a kid growing up, I was born in Easton, Pennsylvania, really big sports city. Lafayette College is right there. So, we went to all of the Lafayette College basketball games. So, that kind of rotated my fall winter schedule around basketball. And of course, that inspired me to play basketball as well. So, all through school, I played basketball. And then on Sundays, we would see my dad. My parents were divorced. Sundays were our one day with him. And we watched football during the football season. Now, there's a hitch. Though my father loved football, he completely despised broadcasters. Kind of ironic. This is what I do. Neither of my jobs has he loved. But we would listen to Italian music while the games were playing. So I really had to learn the rules, what the refs were doing, the signals, the play. I had to learn things young to stay engaged because you're watching a football game and you are listening to music. So I would have to wait till a commercial to sometimes ask my dad or my brother, like, hey, what happened there? What was that penalty? So I learned it on the next level. So between football and basketball, those were my two sports growing up. As I ventured out onto the road as a feature dancer in my many years in the industry, I wanted to see as many ballparks, stadiums, and arenas as possible. And I went to see hockey games as well, even though hockey is not like one of my favorite sports, though I'd love to learn it. And I promise every year I'm going to. And then I get railroaded by the basketball season, football season. But I would go and see games. So when I would get my feature gigs, I would look up, and at this time, we're talking pre-internet. You had to pretty much look in the newspaper. You had to listen to local radio shows. You had to find out when there were games. You got the schedule on television, and I would look what games were going to be in town in the cities where I was. So, sports radio ties into that because most of the time when I was on the road feature dancing, the clubs would have me do morning radio to promote my feature gig, which was really awesome because I got the flow of all the different studios and stations, whether they was in a small town and they were a really small studio, or whether it was just like tons of radio stations for an area like Milwaukee. I remember going into beautiful building that hosted all of the different local channels. So I got to really see what it's like, and I got to watch it kind of develop before the internet and then really take off on a different level once the internet was the added factor there. And sometimes the stations would have tickets that they'd be giving away. And I'd ask, hey, do you have any tickets to this baseball game? I really want to see this park. But I would always make sure that I was staying engaged with that local sports team, whatever season it was. And it helped me make conversation with strangers on the road, whether it was people at the hotel, whether it was people even at the club. I mean, guys loved it when I would stand there and talk to them about their local team. And then I went to a game. And of course, when the internet happened, it got even cooler because I was able to like post photos on Twitter and on social media about me being at the game and whether there was a giveaway that day, a bobblehead or a hat or something. And so, what I learned was that I really loved to communicate about things that I loved to talk about. So when I would go into these shows, sure, I'm promoting my shows at night, but I would also start dialogue about sports. And a lot of the times, the shows were really going to have you in for anywhere from 12 to 15 minutes, like a segment. As a feature dancer, I'd be invited in for a segment. And a lot of the performers didn't want to do them because it was morning radio. So you'd be at the club till 2, you'd get back to the hotel, shower, but next thing you know, they want to pick you back up at 6 to do radio. But I really wanted to be in these shows. I really wanted to meet these hosts. And when you look at what I do now and how well that training tied in, learning the cadence of other hosts, even better, once I was able to listen to these shows on the internet before I would even fly to that city. And I would get to know little things about the hosts, whether they just had a child or, whether they just got married or whether there were sports bettors. Like I would study that audience so that when I would go in to promote the club, I was also able to know who was who and what their little thing was, and they loved it. And those relationships I built while I was on the road, following sports teams, have carried on to what I do now. Also, before the internet, I would get the newspaper to my hotel room. I would read the box scores. I would stay engaged and really have a background of something to follow because I can remember when I first started traveling, hotels had maybe 8 to 10 TV channels. And one of them was always Sport ESPN, and Sports Center used to play on repeat. So if I'd get back from the club at 2 in the morning, I would be able to see what happened that day in sports. Sports help me stay inspired, help me stay healthy, help me learn about every new workout, meal regimen, cryotherapy, heat therapy, like everything that the athletes were doing. I was always reading about and getting involved in, wanting to experiment it. So I owe a lot of my life to sports. Sports kept me engaged in a sense that like I didn't want to be a reckless partier on the road. I wanted to have activities during the day. I wanted to go to a game. I wasn't going to drink at the club and sleep all day like some people did that were on the road. That was just the lifestyle. For me, it was very different. And so I owe that to sports to keeping me really grounded, giving me something to focus on at a time before the internet, not traveling with a laptop, not traveling with as many things to do. You had to really create a space that kept you entertained while you were traveling. It was very different than it is now. So from that, I jumped to now where after 7 years with SiriusXM, I started to go out on my own and do more stuff on my own social media, my YouTube channel every Sunday morning during the football season. I host football Sundays. It's 11 a.m. It's a great time to like talk about your lineup, start sit questions. What players do you want to play? What players are you going to bench? Looking at the weather. Sunday at 11 is a great time because the final injury reports come out at 11:30. So we have 11 to 11:30 to really talk about the basic things like, hey, is there a storm going through? What's going to affect the throw of the ball? Is it raining? Is it snowing? All of those things. And then on Fridays, I've been doing Fantasy Football Fridays since 2015. It was an idea that I came up with while I was at SiriusXM because I had purchased a device that allows me to produce radio remotely. It's the same device that you'd see at like a radio row at the Super Bowl or whenever you see broadcasters that are at a remote location. You see this like weird looking huge thing. I decided to purchase one of those and reach back out to some of the radio stations that I connected with really, really well on the road when I was feature dancing. So, believe it or not, the connections that I have now with the shows that I'm doing now, I initially met when I was on the road as a feature dancer. WDAE in Tampa, I went in and visited them at their station when I was working at the Dollhouse. I visit them every Friday, 4:30 p.m. Eastern time. It's great. It's just great because I know the vibe of the studio because I've been there. The morning after show in St. Louis, also another show, but I used to call into their show all the time to promote my upcoming events, my upcoming movies, all of these things. Sports Radio 610, I got in the most unique way. If you remember Matt McGann, the master of signs, the kid who made the college game day sign about me, we did a YouTube thing. Just